Welcome to Introduction to Autodesk NavisWorks webinar series. My name is Roger Liucci and I'm part of the Microsol Resources Tech team. We're going to start with exercise number 1, collecting collaboration data. Please tune in to the rest of the webinar series where we'll cover navigation and creating views, organization of these views and creating animations. We'll also get into investigating level of detail, or what I like to call model aggregation. From there, we'll talk about the clash detective tool. We'll talk about discovering comments, documentation, communication tools, as well as 4D simulation with NavisWorks Timeliner component. So let's talk about the different ways of collecting data into NavisWorks. We can append. Essentially, append is just like a link. So there are a variety of formats that you can append, everything from inventor file to a SketchUp file. So it can be as complicated or as simple. So you have formats from the piping and processing industry. You have DWG, DXF, DGN for MicroStation, DWF, FBX, even, like I said, SketchUp and 3D Studio files. What we're going to do is we're going to start with some architectural files from Revit architecture. So let's bring one in and then we'll talk about where that came from. So here's the interior geometry. If we jump over to Revit architecture, we'll talk about how we got it there. So in Revit architecture, I start with a 3D view. I verify the level of detail. We're at medium right now. And we'll also go in and we'll discuss what geometry is on. You know, maybe check, make sure we have the equipment that we want or the planting that we're looking for. Okay? So basically, when I export this information, where's the planting? There it is. When I export this information, I'm going to essentially create a cache file. The reason why I need to do that is because NavisWorks cannot read a Revit file directly yet. So we export. This export tool can be bought, well, it comes with NavisWorks Manage or Simulate, but it also can be installed or downloaded from Autodesk's website, and basically it's a free exporting tool, but that's all it does. So if you need an NWC to give to your colleagues using NavisWorks, you can download this file and install the export tool. But now that I have NavisWorks Manage installed, the tool is available to me. So let's check our settings. What kind of settings are available for exporting from Revit to NavisWorks? What I typically do is the current view, because I may want to control visibility of geometry. Things that are not visible in the view will not show up. If you want to do everything, export the entire project. We also have a new option for coordinates. Shared coordinates versus project internal. Tune into one of our other tech webinars talking about shared coordinates in Revit architecture, Revit MEP, Revit structure. So I'm going to choose it all. I'm going to choose shared coordinates. I'm going to convert all of that information. And basically what I'll have to do is save that file. Once that file is created, I go into NavisWorks and I append. Again, append is just like a link. I'm going to choose just to see the cache files, and this time I'm taking the core and shell as well. So the core and shell data has come in. The interior geometry has come in. What happened to the core and shell geometry? Unhide all. There it is. Not that geometry. This geometry. Okay? So basically, I've created links to this geometry into my current NavisWorks file, and as that file might get overwritten, all I have to do is simply refresh. So here's refresh in the home panel, project tab. You have a bunch of different options on how to manage files that are appended. We also have an opportunity of merging geometry. If I merge geometry, essentially duplicate geometry is not going to be merged, but all of the markups and viewpoints created in previous files or other files are going to be merged. So what we typically do is we take a cache file or we take a NavisWorks NWF and we bring that in. So let's take a look at what we have. If I merge this file, okay, I should have a whole series of viewpoints that came with that file. Alright? So we have some 3D views. Those are some odd views. We have some overview views, right? And essentially, I've just compiled views from another NavisWorks scene with this scene. It's a great way of collaborating. So what I've used this for in the past is essentially if I'm working with my colleague, we'll both link or reference the same files. I might work on the architecture, creating architectural folders and architectural views, and my colleague might be creating mechanical or structural views in their NavisWorks file. So a NavisWorks file is a NWF. That's basically the most editable file. The cache file we spoke about, that's a file that essentially would be coming from Revit, for instance. The cache file is also created every time a DWG is referenced. So if we look inside here, there's a cache file. Well, let's look at all files. There's a cache file and a DWG file. So when the DWG was referenced or appended, right, a 7 meg DWG, the civil file sometimes can get pretty big. When that DWG was referenced or appended into the scene, a cache file was created, a fraction of the size. You will continually reference the DWG. So if you start referencing the cache files and then update the DWG, the cache file may not be updated. So again, when possible, reference the original authored software. And as we found out, that's not going to work in the architectural industry when they're using Revit, because Revit, I have to create those cache files specifically. But again, let's just do a little comparison just for the fun of it. So here's a Revit file. That Revit project is 36 megs, and yet the individual cache files are only fractions of the size. Okay, so total these, the interior and the core and shell, and you'll get the total NavisWorks file, total Revit project. So anyway, referencing files into NavisWorks is pretty easy to do. Origins are completely understood. If there is ever an instance where origins are not understood, you could just simply use a series of measuring tools, and those measuring tools will actually give you the opportunity to convert that distance. So if I found a some sort of difference between the two files, I would just simply measure the two distances and then transform those objects that distance. It's quite easy. Thank you for tuning in for the Introduction to NavisWorks webinar series. Please be sure to see all of the webinars. I hope you find them interesting.